I know what you're thinking, but the fact that this is a 420 related video and the fact that my eyes are a little bit red are not connected at all. Total coincidence. I just have like really bad allergies. Hey, what's up you guys? If you're new to my channel, my name is Kylie. How you doing? Glad to have ya. And today I have some very special content for you. Consider this an unofficial guide to the best movies you could possibly watch on 420. See, I told you I have allergies. Before we dive into anything though, this is my horror Instagram account. I've been working really hard on it, doing photography for it, doing stacks and things like that, so I would appreciate it if you followed it. And I also post like polls and questions and things like that so I can interact with you guys over there. Also, just a quick disclaimer before we start, this video is meant for my fellow medicated horror lovers and people that are aged 21 and older, because I will be discussing movies to watch on one of my favorite holidays of the year, which is 420, which is famously known for recreational smoking, so I don't recommend this video if you are not of age or in a legal state. But disclaimers out of the way, I do have quite a few categories to get into today, kind of depending on what your taste is. I have a lot of different genres. I have some that are like action, I have some horror, I have some animated stuff. These are all movies that I love to watch after smoking or having an edible, but I like watching them for very different reasons. So I'm just gonna list off all the categories that I'm gonna talk about, so if you want to skip ahead, you can. We have the contemplative pieces. So this category has like some space movies, some movies that might psych you out a little bit, just movies that really make you think. Like if you really want to be actively engaged in the movie, that's what those recommendations will be. Then we have Fantastical. So this category is obviously for a lot of fantasy movies, but there are some really good like action movies and stuff on there. So it's a more diverse category than you would think, I promise. But anyways, the next category is the shortest one, which is visuals to marvel at. That's basically just my list of the top 5 Marvel movies that have the best visuals. So that's for my Marvel fans. Then we have the animated loves. These are just, in my opinion, some of the most well animated movies of all time, or they're just animated movies that have some of the best visuals of all time. So if you're feeling animated, then that's the category for you. And then finally, the very last category is for the laughs. Just movies with some good high humor. So there's actually a very eclectic mix in that category. There's a lot of very different movies. So I hope you stick around. I hope you're interested in all of these categories because they're all amazing. So to kick it off with the contemplative pieces. Oh, and most of the movies in this category also have amazing visuals because some of them involve a lot of very theoretical stuff, including the very first movie on this list, which is Interstellar. If you're choosing to celebrate 420 with an edible, then I would highly recommend Interstellar because then you could potentially be locked into this incredible movie for the 3-hour runtime. So if you're the type that experiences couch lock, that would be a great choice for you. Not to mention the visuals in the movie are stunning. It's a great think piece. It really makes you kind of wonder about the universe, which is lovely. I'm such a fan of space and thinking about our existence, so Interstellar is a perfect movie for me. And it could be for you if you haven't seen it, if you've kind of been like putting it off, maybe because of the runtime or something, then please check it out now. Up next on this list, we have a horror movie, which would be Gretel and Hansel. If you haven't heard of this movie because it was an independent film, let me read you the synopsis. A long time ago in a distant fairy tale countryside, a young girl leads her brother into a dark wood in desperate search of food and work, only to stumble upon a nexus of terrifying evil. So this is obviously a very contemporary take on Hansel and Gretel, but the themes are so different to any other Hansel and Gretel story you will ever see. And also, fair warning, some people have found this movie to be boring, but I think it's because it's supposed to be more of a visual experience than a narrative experience. You really watch this movie for the visuals. And there's also some trippy themes, so like the imagery that goes with that, oh, it's just mwah. That one I highly recommend for the visuals alone. Up next would be Passengers, and I feel like a lot of people have forgotten about this movie, so I'll read the synopsis of this one too. A malfunction in a sleeping pod on a spacecraft traveling to a distant colony planet wakes one passenger 90 years early. So this is yet another one that it really makes you think, but all the while you get to enjoy such amazing visuals. It's one of my favorite space movies of all time. I know a lot of people didn't really like it, and I know it like might not have the strongest story, but I thoroughly enjoy it. Like I said, one of my favorite space movies. This one, again, like just kick back, relax. You can kind of turn your mind off because the story is not too important and just enjoy these amazing visuals. Up next, we have an alien movie, yes, and that would be Arrival. This movie has very important themes and topics about humanity and the way that we kind of as a collective respond to large issues issues. Feels very relatable to right now, but in the movie they are dealing with several alien ships landing on Earth and trying to communicate with them. Kind of deals with the concept of time. It's very, very cool. Not to mention these visuals. Like, I love the look of these aliens. It's something so unique and different. The acting performances are also incredible. I can't recommend this movie enough. Up next is not a movie for the visuals because it is a movie that is more so just to blow your mind, and that is Coherence. Strange things begin to happen when a group of friends gather for a dinner party on an evening when a comet is passing overhead. So I can't really talk about the plot of this movie at all without giving something away. Basically, all you need to know is that a comet passes overhead and really weird stuff happens. It's one of my favorite movies that I have watched in the past couple of months. It's so mind-bending. I love the concept so much. I'm a total sci-fi nerd, by the way. And I think it is so devastatingly underrated. So if you've never seen that movie, I think it's available on Prime, and I think it's also available on Shudder. But if it's not available on those, I promise it is worth it to rent it. Up next is a movie where you would need to tread with caution, but that is In the Earth. This movie was actually just released, I believe, a couple of days ago, and I recently went to see it. And as I stated in my Letterboxd review, I felt like I was witnessing God. As the world searches for a cure to a disastrous virus, a scientist and park scout venture deep in the forest for a routine equipment run. So this is a movie where I say proceed with caution because I don't think that a lot of people are really going to be able to handle this one. And also some people will think it's just way too weird and absolutely hate it, because some people really hate elevated horror. So if you're not a fan of that, then don't watch this movie. If you're a very open-minded individual and you really like art house horror, then watch this movie. But another disclaimer, so much about this movie is appealing to your senses. So the body horror, the visuals, and the auditory stuff going on is all a trip. A lot of people that reviewed this movie kind of complained that it doesn't really make sense, but I believe it was super purposeful because from what I got out of it, the whole thing felt like an allegory to surrendering to magic mushrooms. It was insanely psychedelic, so a lot of people are not gonna get it, not gonna like it, but if you're a very open-minded and trippy individual, then I highly recommend it. Okay, last on the list of the contemplative pieces, and that would be Knowing. I believe this movie came out in 2009, and it's a Nick Cage movie. MIT professor John Kostler links a mysterious list of numbers from a time capsule to past and future disasters and sets out to prevent the ultimate catastrophe. So this movie also will probably not be for everybody, but it combines a lot of my very favorite things. It has a great kind of over-the-top cheesy performance by Nicolas Cage. It has themes that really make you think. It's insanely stylized. I love the color palette and the cinematography of this movie. Some parts of it are really intense, but I still recommend it. I'm fairly sensitive and I got through it okay. And the twist at the end, I guarantee will trip you out. It's amazing. Okay, now moving on to the Fantastical category. Up first on this list, without a shadow of a doubt, is the live-action remake of Alice in Wonderland. I kind of feel like this movie and its sequel get slept on a little bit. Both are incredible, both deal with really great themes, both are very empowering. They both make me feel incredibly good about, like, being a weirdo, and they're just a ton of fun. Not to mention, because you knew I was going to, these visuals. I love how kind of fake and painted the world feels, and all the characters that are so insanely exaggerated, and yeah, maybe the CGI is not the best, but it just feels like you're watching a fairy tale book that has come to life. I think it's phenomenal. So I really don't mind the CGI that doesn't look as great because in my opinion it kind of adds to the style of the film. And also, I'm sure that many people are aware by now, but that movie is also an allegory for taking a trip on magic mushrooms. Okay, the next one in the Fantastical category, just bear with me on this. Spy Kids 1 and 2. These movies are just so weird. It's about this family of spies. These two kids learn that their parents were once spies and then they become spies themselves. This movie involves some of the zaniest villains I have ever seen. It's almost disturbing how strange these movies are, and I won't get into details, but I must point out that the Foops Fooglies scarred me as a child. I'm sure you could tell just by the few visuals that I showed that those movies are insanely weird, but if you're up for a trip, if you're up for a weird time, please check them out. I have loved both of those movies since I was a kid, but those are kids movies, so take that recommendation with a grain of salt. I might only enjoy them because of nostalgia reasons, times? I don't really know, but it is a trip. Moving on now to a horror film, and that would be A Nightmare on Elm Street 4: The Dream Master. This might seem kind of random, I know, but this movie has by far my favorite practical effects of the entire franchise. They're super gross, super cool. I love everything about them. There's also an amazing documentary on YouTube if you want to watch how they did all those practical effects. I highly recommend watching that after you watch the film. It'll just give you all the more appreciation for them. Up next, which is yet another Tim Burton film, and that would be Dark Shadows. This is also one that I would recommend for the laughs because it is out there. I think it's a super underrated vampire movie. Set in the 70s, an imprisoned vampire, Barnabas Collins, is set free and returns to his ancestral home, where his dysfunctional descendants are in need of his protection. I have talked about that movie very recently on my channel though, so I'm gonna move on. Up next, this next one is if you really want to have just a stupid fun time, that would be Suicide Squad. Watching this movie is kind of like watching a car crash. You just can't look away. It is probably the most fun movie that I've ever played a drinking game along to because the whole thing is so ridiculously repetitive. It's so much fun. Plus the visuals of that movie, yes, there is a lot of CGI, but they're still incredible. I think it's really fun because it really does look like a comic book that has been brought to life. Up next, one of my hands down favorite movies in this category, and that would be Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them. If you watch this movie for no other reason, please watch it for the creatures. I'm not even going to show half of them in this video right now because so many of them are such a fun surprise. I just wanted to give you a taste because I promise this movie is worth it. And also don't worry if you haven't seen the Harry Potter movies because Fantastic Beasts is a prequel, so it doesn't really matter. You can watch it before you watch the Harry Potter films. Plus, Fantastic is literally in the title, so you can't really go wrong. The next movies on this list would be Now You See Me, both 1 and 2. I love both of them, and speaking of Harry Potter, Daniel Radcliffe actually stars in the second movie, and he's incredible. These movies are just so much fun. I love the magic. I love the grandeur of it. They might be a little bit contrived, sure. I mean, they're not the best stories in the world, but regardless of that, I promise you will have so much fun with the movies. Up next, this is arguably my favorite action movie of all time, and that would be Kingsman: The Secret Service. If you've been hankering for a gentleman spy movie that doesn't take itself seriously, this is the movie for you. James Bond is cool. I've seen a couple of those movies, but they take themselves so seriously. It was amazing to finally have a gentleman spy movie with just like crazy over-the-top cinematography, balls to the walls visuals, like they're just so much fun. The second movie wasn't as good, but it really did lean into the campiness of it, and for that I loved it. So if you haven't seen those, highly recommend them. Up next, this movie is for my fellow literature fans, my fellow romance fans, and that would be The Great Gatsby. Yes, the remake, because oh my god, the visuals of this movie. You'll notice that visuals are a very common theme for this video, but come on! It's so whimsical. Again, it's kind of similar to Alice in Wonderland where it looks like it's a fairy tale that's come to life. It's happy, it's exciting, it's heartbreaking, it's everything. I love The Great Gatsby so much. It's also a fairly long film. I believe it's over 2.5 hours long. So again, if you experience couch lock, The Great Gatsby would be excellent for you. But moving on to a movie of equal, if not higher caliber in visuals, and that would be Moulin Rouge. This is for my musical fans, so if you're not a fan of musicals, this is not for you. However, I'm not really a fan of musicals, and I adore this movie. Nicole Kidman and Ewan McGregor have amazing performances in this surreal movie. Not to mention all the color and grandeur of it. Again, if you're a romance fan, this is a movie for you. But for the visuals of the performances and everything alone, I think this movie is so worth seeing. Up next, I'm kind of gonna lump these together because I think that young adult dark fantasy is probably one of my favorite subgenres. So up next would be both Twilight and Harry Potter, just the whole franchises on either side. For 420, I feel like I would more highly recommend Twilight because it's just so ridiculous. I think I've mentioned several times that it's one of my favorite franchises of all time. The writing is just so awful, it's beautiful. Those movies are hilarious, they are insanely ironic. I get a kick out of watching them still to this day. Back when I was 12, it was because I genuinely loved the stories and I loved the books, and of course, Taylor Lautner, oh my god. And now to this day, I enjoy them equally as much as I did back then, but because they're so fucking funny. But moving on, anyways, up next would be A Series of Unfortunate Events starring Jim Carrey. This movie yet again with the visuals. I mean, I just can't get over it. You follow the Baudelaires after their parents have died, and now they are in custody of an evil, distant relative who just wants to take all their money. They encounter some very, very strange characters. It also stars Meryl Streep. The cast of this movie is honestly incredible. And as you could probably tell, the color palette, cinematography, everything about that movie, the performances of the kids, it's great. I think it's a movie that a lot of people have kind of forgotten about. It's just a lot of fun. Okay, moving on to the last movie in my Fantastical category, and that would be Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. This has been one of my most watched movies in my life, I think, because I was so obsessed with this movie as a child. I've had my Charlie and the Chocolate Factory DVD probably since it came out in 2005. I had just turned 6 years old when this movie came out, and I was obsessed. Honestly, kind of still am because of the stylization of it. A young boy wins a tour through the most magnificent chocolate factory in the world, led by the world's most unusual candy maker. Yeah, talk about unusual. Willy Wonka is played by Johnny Depp, and it's amazing. I'm not really gonna say more. Go into the movie with a fresh mind, an open mind, and just enjoy. Also make sure you have candy on deck though, because that movie will definitely give you the munchies. Alright, moving on to the next category, and that would be visuals to marvel at. My top 5 favorite visuals in Marvel movies. Well, actually, an honorable mention would be Black Panther, because these visuals with the opening scene alone just really hook me into the movie. I think it's really pretty. But also the look of Wakanda, the look of all their technology, it's just a very cool looking movie. So that is my honorable mention, and then coming in at number 5 would be Spider-Man Far From Home. That's just simply because of this. I mean, look at this. They literally put together an entire psychedelic sequence, and as you can see, it's a trip. So there is a lot of other visual stuff going on in that movie, but for that scene alone, that is why it makes number 5. Up next would be Ant-Man and the Wasp. The first Ant-Man movie is fun and has some crazy visuals too. Conceptually, I love the Ant-Man movies, but in the second one especially, they venture through quantum space. This really just couldn't look any more fabulous. It's so cool, so high concept, so sci-fi, just everything that I love about a Marvel movie. Up next would have to go to Thor Ragnarok, which is probably one of my most rewatched Marvel films. This one doesn't have as high concept of visuals, but it's just very, very colorful. So for that reason, it's really fun, it's amazing to look at, it just totally earned its place on this list. At number 2, that would have to go to Doctor Strange. This is not one of my favorite Marvel movies, but the visuals of this movie are insane. I just really can't deny how sick this looks. Plus they're wizards, I mean, enough said. Coming in at number 1 is actually 2 movies, technically, but both Guardians of the Galaxy movies. Specifically though, I would say Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, because this planet that they land on, the high concept fight sequences that we get to see, they're insane. I love the look of it so much. It's just so colorful. I really love everything about this movie. Again, I feel like it's one of the ones that kind of leaned into all the more campy aspects of its first film. And with this and Thor Ragnarok and Ant-Man and the Wasp, that's when Marvel really started to be more creative. Their budgets obviously got bigger, and so did the concepts. So there you have it for my top 5 movies in the Marvel Universe for their visuals. Moving on to the next category, which would be the animated loves. Because I do have only 5 on this list, I think I'm gonna rank them as well. Coming in at number 5 would be a franchise, and that would be Ice Age. I highly recommend watching these in order, but my favorites of the franchise are 3 and 5. If you don't know what these movies are about, it's about a woolly mammoth, a saber-toothed tiger, and a sloth, and they form a herd. They're just a bunch of outcasts in the animal kingdom, and so they band together. And this franchise just follows all of their wild adventures. It's, in my opinion, one of the best animated franchises for children that there could possibly be. I really honestly can't think of another children's franchise that is just that good. The casting is insane. There are some really big stars in these movies, and also with each movie they just build on more and more to their herd, so it's a lot of fun. It's just about a band of misfits and finding like-minded animals and making families. Very sweet, and like I said, my favorites are 3 and 5. Coming in at number 4, and that would have to go to Coco. Now, if you're not really trying to be in your feels, I might not recommend this one, but visually, yet again, I must say, wow. The land of the dead and everything is so colorful and so beautiful, and not to mention, it is just so brilliant brilliantly animated. Pixar did something insanely special with this one. That is one of my favorite Pixar movies, hands down, but moving on to my number 3, and that would go to The Incredibles 2. I don't know if I'm in the minority of liking the second one more than the original, but I thought it was fantastic. I think part of the reason is because the first one came out 14 years ago, and you can tell how far animation has come. The sequel looks so good. There are some really crazy, insane sequences. It also builds on the original story really well. I think it's just great. Number 2 in this category, though, would be Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. I'm just kind of gonna let these visuals speak for themselves a little bit. I know I said before with Suicide Squad that feels like a comic book come to life, but this movie is like a comic book come to life. The stylization, the acting performances, everything about this movie is amazing. I just don't really have the words to express how highly I recommend that film. Moving on to my number 1 animated love, and that would have to go to Soul. Now, this isn't my favorite on this list. This is just purely in terms of visuals, because they have some high concept moments in this movie, but they're so gorgeous. This is a really trippy one. This one also does belong in the contemplative category because it deals with topics like what happens after death and also what happens before life. If you haven't seen it, I'm sure that you have seen all of the hype surrounding it, and I promise it's 100% earned. The movie really is that incredible. But that does it for the animated loves, and now it is time to move on to the final category of this video. And our last category is For the Laughs. So these are movies that might not be visually fantastic or stimulating, although some of them are. And this list actually mostly consists of horror movies, but a lot of them are very campy or very stupid or just very ironic. So I'm gonna get into the horror movies first, and then I'll do the comedies last. Up first in my For the Laughs category, that would be The Final Destination, also known as Final Destination 4. A horrifying premonition saves a young man and his friends from death during a racetrack accident, but terrible fates await them nonetheless. So this is obviously part of the Final Destination franchise, but it is considered the worst one of the franchise, but that's why it's the best one for 420. Again, it's a great movie to play a drinking game with. It's insanely stupid, but that's what makes it so much fun. So that's why it's in the category For the Laughs. Up next would be Cult of Chucky. Now this one won't appeal to everybody, but this is one of my favorite movies in the Child's Play franchise. If you're not a fan of Child's Play and you haven't seen any of the movies leading up to it, that is required reading. If you watch this movie without watching the rest of the franchise, it's not really gonna make any sense to you. And even if you've seen the franchise, it doesn't make that much sense, but it is just super fun. They leaned into all of the elements of this franchise that I think make it great, and it was kind of a culmination of all these different storylines coming together. I thought it was amazing. There were definitely a lot of missed opportunities and it could have been a lot better, but For the Laughs, if you're a Child's Play fan, it's, oh my gosh, cannot recommend it highly enough. Up next would be a Friday the 13th movie, and that is Jason X. Jason Voorhees returns with a new look, a new machete, and his same murderous attitude as he is awakened on a spaceship in the 25th century. So this movie is ridiculous. It's one of the most disliked movies in the entire Friday the 13th franchise, which consists of 12 movies. But for me personally, it is literally my second favorite of the franchise. It's so out there and it's so much fun. You just really have to love it for what it is, because it's most certainly not just another carbon copy sequel of the Friday the 13th franchise. It's something really wacky and really out there, and I always have a great time watching it. So it's really not meant to be taken seriously, and that's why it's in the category For the Laughs. Up next is a movie that is actually genuinely a good dark comedy though, and that is Ready or Not. A bride's wedding night takes a sinister turn when her eccentric new in-laws force her to take part in a terrifying game. I feel like you already know what I'm gonna say, and look at these visuals. Look at the color palette and the cinematography. This is one of my top 10 movies of all time, to be honest, and I want to say that Grace is probably one of my favorite horror movie characters of all time. I cannot stress enough how much I love this movie. It just gives me all the good feelings. Up next would be yet another dark comedy that stars Samara Weaving, and that would be the Babysitter movies. These are Netflix original films, and oh my gosh, if you haven't seen them, they're amazing, and I think that they're the best thing that Netflix has ever done. So in the first Babysitter movie, the events of one evening take an unexpected turn for the worst for a young boy trying to spy on his babysitter. Yeah, that's kind of putting it lightly, and then again with this sequel, they took everything that made the first movie good and just expanded upon it, and they went even more crazy in the second one. I prefer the second one. I think that the sequel is far superior to the original, and I loved it so much. So for all my dark comedy fans, please don't sleep on the Babysitter movies. Up next is yet another dark comedy, and that would be Mom and Dad. Yet another movie starring Nicolas Cage, yes. A teenage girl and her younger brother must survive a wild 24 hours during which a mass hysteria of unknown origin causes parents to turn violently on their own kids. Yeah, so I know Nick Cage has a lot of insane movies, and this is definitely up there as one of the best. It's such a ridiculous concept that's twisted for the humorous aspects of it, and I promise you it will genuinely shock you if you like crazy Nick Cage, over-the-top acting, insane fight sequences, stuff like that. I promise this movie is for you. I love it, and it's 100% in my top 5, if not my top 3 Nick Cage movies. Up next is yet another dark comedy, and that would be Troll Hunter. This is a Norwegian found footage film, but please, you guys, please give it a chance. A group of students investigates a series of mysterious bear killings, but learns that there are much more dangerous things going on. They start to follow a mysterious alleged poacher, but learn that he is actually a troll hunter. So I love found footage and I love dark comedies, and this is a wonderful marriage of the two. It's hard to describe this movie because it is very ironic and self-aware. The movie seems to know that it's ridiculous, and yet at the same time, it's kind of treated with this ironic, serious tone, and that just kind of makes it all the more fun. It's almost similar to Twilight, where it's taking itself seriously for the people that want to take it seriously, but it's also incredibly ironic and hilarious. That's kind of a weird comparison. The movies have really nothing in common. It's also a wonderful movie to start expanding your palette to more international films. I truthfully don't know if I've ever seen a Norwegian movie before, but it was excellent. It's super fun. If nothing else, just try it out. Like, please just try it. So again, I just strongly recommend that one. And the last horror movie on this list is kind of like a joke, but it's The Haunting of Molly Hartley. Sarah Hawkinson, who is Possessed by Horror here on YouTube, is very widely known for loving that movie despite it being hot garbage, but it's honestly such an enjoyable movie. I love it too. It just kind of feels like a time capsule of the early 2000s, and that's why I love it so much, because it makes me feel really nostalgic. A girl with PTSD attempts to refresh her life at a new school, but soon finds it impossible when she's afflicted by not only bullying and bad memories, but also the supernatural. It's just kind of like the perfect embodiment of cheesy early 2000s horror. If you're a fan of that, I promise you'll like that movie and you'll find it hilarious. Okay, now moving on to the comedy movies in this category, and they're actually my top 5 to watch on 420, so again, I am gonna rank them. Coming in at number 5, and that would have to be Blockers. This is one of my favorite comedies of all time. 3 parents try to stop their daughters from losing their virginity on prom night. Oh, and also it stars John Cena. This movie is probably in my top 3 comedies of all time because the message that we learn throughout the movie is so sweet. It's so sex positive and empowering, and I feel like the parents in the movie learn a really good lesson. It's really surprising how effective comedies can be at relaying very serious and important themes, so Blockers really is the whole package. Coming in at number 4, and that would be Good Boys. I feel like this movie is so slept on, and I love it so much. 3 6th grade boys ditch school and embark on an epic journey while carrying accidentally stolen drugs, being hunted by teenage girls, and trying to make their way home in time for a long-awaited party. This movie is really just as insane as it sounds. It's produced by Seth Rogen, and again, it's also a very positive coming-of-age movie. Great themes about friendship and growing up. I loved it. Oh, and also super funny. Moving on to my number 3, and that would go to Superbad. Superbad to me is just kind of the epitome of the American high school experience, and in so many movies they portray American high school as extremely cliquey. There's a ton of like very petty drama. Everything is just super exaggerated to this hyper-realistic version of high school in America, which is fine and it's fun in movies, but it's just not really realistic. I feel like with Superbad, I don't know why, but I just related to it so heavily. It's pretty much the embodiment of your first night out on the town. I don't know about you guys, but for me, it was also senior year and like the summer before senior year. That was when I first started branching out and, you know, entered my rebellious phase, if you will. So Superbad, I just connect to on a very deeply personal level and has amazing performances from Michael Cera, Jonah Hill, Bill Hader, and Seth Rogen, of course. 4 of my favorite comedic actors all in one movie, and oh, it's really just my ultimate comfort movie. Moving on to my second favorite comedy to watch on 420, and that would be Pineapple Express. Yes, yet another Seth Rogen film. A process server and his marijuana dealer wind up on the run from hitmen and a corrupt police officer after he witnesses his dealer's boss murder a competitor while trying to serve papers on him. This movie is as insane as it sounds. It is a stony, wild, hilarious ride. My favorite part of the movie, though, hands down, has to go to Bill Hader's cameo in the beginning. I love him so much. I love Bill Hader, and you'll just have to see when you see it. I'm not spoiling anything. But moving on to my favorite comedy to watch on 420 and the last movie of this video, and that would go to the live-action Scooby-Doo. I said what I said. After an acrimonious breakup, the Mystery Inc. gang are individually brought to an island resort to investigate strange goings-on. This movie is also a trip. It's completely ridiculous, but I have said over and over, both on this channel and on social media, just anywhere that I can proclaim this, that it is the most perfectly cast movie maybe ever. It's just so fun. So many of the special effects have aged so poorly, and so much of the movie is actually not really children's humor. A lot of it feels extremely adult, and so I feel like the movie is still made for me at 21 years old. It's one of the best kind of teen, young adult movies of all time, in my opinion. Amazing performances, super, super fun. And of course, because it's for kids, no one will just outright say it, but Scooby and Shaggy obviously love to smoke weed. They're just constantly munching, they're very motivated by food. Shaggy's outfit literally makes him look like a tree, which if you're not familiar, tree is actually one of the many nicknames for weed. And also, you know, it's just earth tones. But I think it's one of the ultimate movies to watch on 420. But then again, literally all of these movies are for very different reasons, and this was a list of a lot of my favorite movies of all time. If you couldn't tell, I live for trippy stuff. But yeah, that does it. This was probably a longer video today, so I hope you were down with that. I hope you enjoyed. Again, like I mentioned, all my social media will be linked down below. And again, I must stress, act accordingly tomorrow, be responsible. Again, if you are underaged or you're not in a legal state, I am not promoting smoking or anything like that to you. Please wait until you're more grown up or medicated to make that decision, or, you know, wait until you're in a state or a country where it's legal. And yeah, other than that, I just hope that you guys have a great celebration tomorrow if you are celebrating the holiday. Please let me know in the comments if you choose any of these movies to watch. I'm so excited to see out of this super eclectic and mixed list which ones you guys will choose to watch. But that does it for me. I hope that you enjoyed this video, and I hope I catch you in the next one. Bye!